Hey, it's your old pal Lucid Stu again, and we are back in Dreams VR checking out freehand sculpting with the DS4 controller. Let's get to it. Last video we worked on grid in VR and things were kind of rough with the controls getting pretty unbearable after about 15 minutes of work. I'm determined to work in Dreams VR in some capacity, so I will keep striving. In this video I will be sculpting a character head like this one to encourage me to stay off the grid, and I'll go over a few techniques as I come across them. When you're starting out on something like a face, it's helpful to avoid edge shapes because they cause wrinkles in smooth shapes with a lot of blending like skin. However, with enough practice, those built-in edge shapes can be used to give surfaces interest and detail like wrinkles and bumps. So I'm going to show you a technique I've been using lately that will help with that. But first, let's talk a little about skin tone. Skin tone in humans varies quite dramatically, but the basic color of skin is almost always some shade of red or orange. If you keep that in mind as you move from light to dark or between levels of saturation, you'll stay fairly realistic. It's also important to keep in mind that skin tones are usually mid-values, not too light and not too dark, and usually skin tones have at least some saturation, but rarely have very much. So you're probably never going to see a truly white person, or a truly black person, or a truly orange person, for instance. For this sculpt, I've chosen a 3/4 dark orange, mostly desaturated. Later on, after I finished, I decided it was a little too gray, and I added some orange in the sculpt's tweak menu. Now to build in all those edges I was talking about, I'm going to use a wedge shape with the smear tool. I'm going to set that spinning by flicking the touchpad on the DS4, and then I'm going to smear a roughly head-shaped blob with those wedges. Nothing needs to be even close to accurate, we just want a lump of edges to work with. So at this point, VR freehand is feeling okay. It's working out better than it did for me on the grid anyway. The added depth is helpful for some things, but honestly I'm pretty good with depth outside of VR, and I'm better at sculpting in general outside of VR, so I didn't get any sort of boost here. Back to this technique, the general idea from this point is to add to and subtract from this edge lump with blended shapes until it's a little more realistic. My current philosophy for faces is sort of half symmetrical, half not. I like to use the mirror tool off and on to get the general head shape down and then turn it off to make adjustments here and there to each side independently. You may have just noticed me shaking the controller to try to right the cursor. I started having issues at this point. I was sitting in a chair and I ended up standing up in order to keep going. Standing worked better as far as the cursor went, but the effect for motion in VR is increased standing, and unfortunately I'm kinda used to flying around the scene while sitting at this point. As a result, there were a couple of times where I felt like I was going to fall over while sculpting, and while this is an okay position for a half hour or so, I don't think you're really going to sculpt for long periods of time standing up, not without a lot of practice anyway. I'm not really sure what the issue is. It may have something to do with my camera position, so I'll keep working on it. I also occasionally run into this annoying issue where my cursor is too close or too far away and doesn't want to adjust easily, but this also happens outside of VR, so I don't think VR is adding anything special to that mix. I could see VR giving you a big advantage very close up, but every time I'm in that position, I feel like my controller is right against my chest in a way that doesn't make it easy to sculpt. So overall for me, using the DS4 this way is kind of like not being in VR, but with this minor advantage, and all these drawbacks. So I was in VR for about 15 minutes before I had to stand up, and then another 15 minutes after that. I started running into the same issues I did on grid. The problem wasn't as bad, but I just felt frustrated and like I just wanted to make something instead of putting so much effort into fighting controls. So I took the headset off and finished this sculpt up outside of VR. My overall impression of sculpting in VR with the DS4 is that it's not for me. Might be a different story if I were just starting in Dreams. Trust me, I remember struggling for about a month to get a grasp on the controls. Not to toot my own horn, but I'm pretty good with the DS4 as far as sculpting outside of VR goes. As far as sculpting goes, there's nothing about VR that I see that I need that badly. So if it's non-VR DS4 or VR DS4, I'm picking non-VR. However, I have not given up on sculpting in VR yet. I have the Moves controllers, and several people have told me that they are very beneficial to sculpting in VR, and that if I give them about a week, I can probably break through the issues I had with them previously outside of VR. So coming up are my takes on sculpting and painting in VR with the Moves from the perspective of someone who is solid with the DS4 outside of VR, so stay tuned. By the way, the sculpture you've been watching take shape is available in completed form in the Dreamiverse as Male Head 4. At this point in the video, I'm sculpting pretty similarly to my basic head sculpt techniques that you can find in my human head sculpting video in the card. Anyway, that's all for now. Until next time, I'll see you in the Dreamiverse.